Cyberpunk 2077 is getting closer and closer, and with that, the hype is getting crazy. But until the release, we will have to do with every bit of info that gets released. And this video has some of the best news I've read yet. Paweł Sasko, lead quest designer, was interviewed by Polish website Spiderweb, and he talked about some fantastic systems that are being implemented in Cyberpunk 2077. This is how Sasko described the Witcher 3 quest system. Witcher 3 had one main stem, which had side threads departing from it, which was called the ear. Now I don't know if the translation is off, but yes, they called it the ear. Now what CD Projekt Red did with Cyberpunk is what is amazing. It is described as, in Cyberpunk, on the other hand, we additionally debuted the whole and added additional threads that are quests that can trigger in various circumstances. These quests are never linear. This is the internal system that we call the token system, and it decides when to assign these quests to you. The token system sounds so awesome. The game essentially knows by itself when to trigger a quest for a player at any given time when certain criteria is met. So this creates a unique experience for every player. Sasko mentions that it is so complex that even he as a dev wouldn't be able to tell you when the quest will trigger. This means that even I can't tell you in which order these quests will start, because it is the game that decides when you get them depending on your progress. Of course, we control and decide what the conditions must be met for these quests to start, but it is not so easy to tell. This game has the most complex structure we've ever made. It really does sound like a complicated structure of branches and branches of a system that are all connected and woven intricately. Now, the structure was implemented from the feedback from The Witcher 3, which was said by critics and players to be too long and occasionally slow. CD Projekt decided that they would make Cyberpunk's main storyline shorter than The Witcher's, but add a ton of side quests to the game. Now what is very interesting and potentially groundbreaking is that the players can essentially beat the game without finishing the main thread. Here is what Sasko said. In Cyberpunk structure, we have this ear, which is the center. The main plot of history, and around it are those secondary threads that can trigger in different ways. Side threads cause something that we haven't done before, namely they modify the main thread, and in such a way that you may or may not complete the main thread at all. But you can in the game and receive completely different epilogues than another player who chose a different life path, and he made other choices, met other characters, and built other relationships with them. So players can have different endings to the game and not even finish the main story. That is an insane system CD Projekt Red has completed. Coming from Sasko himself, this means that Cyberpunk will have huge replayability, more than I originally anticipated for the game. There could be so many endings in this game that some people may never see them. It will be interesting to see which parts of the game dictate others, and if you can completely change the game with one decision. Do you guys find this system to be game-changing, or am I just overreacting? Let me know down in the comments below. We also get a little more info on how side quests and how many paths a mission could possibly have. Cyberpunk will have a ton of side quests in the game. Sasko attempted to guess how much is in the game. While answering the second part of the question, i.e. how many side threads we prepared, I would say at this point that if we only look at the story content that we have made by hand, handcrafted by my team, we have the equivalent of the main plot and a little more. It all depends on how the player plays. Cyberpunk has more side content than the actual main story. This is wild and will give a ton of side stories for players to uncover and play through, each offering a unique experience. CD Projekt is going for some crazy ambitious stuff, and if they pull this off, it will be a gaming milestone. Speaking about the Maelstrom mission where we talked to them about the bot, Sasko mentioned that there was 12 different paths that could be taken, and each one has a different length of time it would take to finish the mission. The quest you played at Old Food Factory where you met Maelstromers and talked to Dum Dum and Royce has 12 paths, and these paths are totally different lengths. Depending on which path you play, this length is the quest, and therefore it is very difficult to answer this question clearly. This does depend on playstyle like solo or a stealth approach, but it's still neat that this one quest we have seen tons of times still has branches we haven't seen yet. I could imagine the more grander quests have way more than 12 paths, so seeing how everything can play out in the game will take many playthroughs if someone really wanted to see it all. And for all the pacifists out there, Cyberpunk can be completed without killing a single person. To me, this is the ultimate playthrough, especially for a city that has so much violence. All the most important choices in the game, all bosses and elite opponents, there is always a way to go without killing anyone. Sometimes aggression and the fight with the opponent is something that can not be avoided. But it is not that you have to take someone's legs and hands off, but it is also not so that you can completely avoid the fight. But you are able to fight in such a way completely that you only neutralize your opponents and thus pass the game. They actually made the game around a way that a player can just neutralize instead of kill, which is awesome. I wonder how that impacts any of the story by letting a main boss survive. Like, will they come back for you later, or are they just kind of gone after that? Either way, being able to finish the game with no death would be a huge challenge and accomplishment, especially with all the cool weapons players will have at their disposal. Sasko also mentioned some new info on life paths that I found to be very interesting. We finally get some info about the Nomad life path. and of course involved in the Maelstrom quest. The Nomad will have other information that the Corpo doesn't have, obviously, and this is that the Nomads can steal the convoy signatures of the corporation's convoys. And this is because the Nomads specialize in robbing them. So using these signatures, you could have made another path while speaking to Meredith. I'm not quite sure how this would have worked in the dialogue scene, but it's nice to have some info about what a Nomad can bring to an intense convo. Along with this info, we learn that each life path has a different epilogue, which is assumed, and that most importantly, a player can fully stick to their life path, or they can actually change them when playing the game. These various possibilities associated with the chosen path do not give you a completely different ending. But by sticking to this particular life path, specific path of origin, as Nomad you will meet people similar to you. It's the same with the other life paths. They all have custom, specially prepared epilogues. What's important is that you can change your paths. Playing as Street Kid or Corpo, you can start working with the Nomads, continue it throughout the game, and in the game as Nomad. But when you play as a Nomad and in the game as a Nomad, you'll get extra tracks and elements. This shows that there are a lot of these layers. So you can stick to your given life path and hang out with the people of the same lifestyle, or while playing, you can start hanging out with another group and actually change your path. I had no idea this was possible, so this news is pretty sweet. It just means you aren't ever locked into a choice you make. Maybe you think Corpo will be awesome, but you hate it, and you can become a Nomad living life on the road. It makes for awesome roleplay characters for players in that niche, and it allows for people to experience a lot more of the game with one character if that's what they want. In one of my earlier videos, I questioned if how you create your character affects how NPCs see us. And Sasko actually answers this in an interview, and the simple answer is that your voice affects how the NPCs around you will identify you. How the player is perceived in the game depends on how the character was built. How you created your character is influenced by the type of body you have, whether it is male or female, but the voice you choose affects how you perceive the characters you meet and what pronoun they address to you, i.e. how you identify yourself as a character. And he goes into the detail that genital choice is separate from body and voice choice. These choices make the most difference to the game. What voice you choose is responsible for how you identify yourself, how the characters in the game identify you, and how the characters in the game will address each other. CD Projekt wanted to make sure players can freely make whatever character they want in the game and be recognized any way they want to be. He goes on to say that the NPCs have their own preferences and that players' choices can influence these characters to friendships, relationships, and romances. These characters have their own specific preferences, and sometimes they will like you and sometimes they won't. You as a player, by making your choices, will build an individual story with these characters, and you can interact with them or not. Thanks to this, you'll be able to create your individual story and relationship with this particular character. Will you lead to the development of friendship or a romantic relationship between you and lead to sex in an intimate, close relationship? It is in your hands. This is the theme with Cyberpunk through and through. Your choices matter. Whatever you do in the game will lead you down a path others might not get. Each decision you make affects an NPC, it affects the story, it affects your character. What you do is unique, and you change Night City around you. If you enjoy this content, hit that like button and click on one of the upcoming videos or the ones in the description. Hit that sub button to keep up with the latest Cyberpunk video, and until next time, peace.